It was a Friday afternoon and summer vacation had just started. Everyone at the school was like really excited about it, and especially Trixie. Trixie was in fact standing outside school waiting for her boyfriend Sandalwood. Sandalwood and Trixie had been dating for about 4 weeks at this point. She was really happy now when he actually had asked her out for the first time. Ever since then, she was really excited. And now, especially when they both were going to Camp Everfree among others from the school. But something was going to happen. As she was waiting outside school for her boyfriend, he actually walked up to her and asked if they could talk for a moment. He was something he needed to tell her, and she was a bit curious. So she said that she said that he could tell her anything. At first, he was silent. She could see that was something on his mind, but this was something that she didn't even expect to happen. As she was standing there, most of the other friends, classmates had actually left the area. But what he did tell her shocked her very much. He said that he did like her, he did care about her, but he didn't have any longer feelings for her, and he hoped that they could still be good friends. Since he really cared about her, but he didn't have any feelings for her. Even though that Trixie acted as she didn't felt hurt, she nodded and she said that she understood, and then she walked away, even though she was in her heart very heartbroken. She tried to act normal. She tried not to even to cry, and she walked all the way home. But she didn't start crying after she had just entered her home. After being dating for about 4 weeks, she thought maybe he could be the one that she has been looking for. But this breakup, just shortly before they were going to Camp Everfree, she started to have doubts if she even wanted to go to the camp along with among others, especially with Sandalwood. She hadn't even told anyone, not even some of her close friends, about this breakup because since since Camp Everfree was about once we're not supposed to be for another week or so. So for the next 7 days, she stayed at home, watched some TV, just by herself. Even when some of her close friends did ask her if she really wanted to hang out with them. But she always declined the offer and preferred to be alone. But as this Camp Everfree day's arrival came closer and closer, she wasn't even aware if any of her friends or especially if anyone at school was aware about her breakup with Sandalwood. She tried to tell her parents that she no longer wanted to go to the camp every free. She preferred to be staying at home instead. But since she had already made plans to go, and her parents had also made some plans for themselves, so there was nothing else that they could make to to change that. It was too late. So Trixie had to go to this camp, even regardless that she didn't want to go, because she didn't know it would only feel awkward when she was going to be at the same camp with her ex-boyfriend Sandalwood. Even that there was might be feeling awkward feelings between for her to seeing that her boyfriend acting as nothing had happened. But even she had tried to convince her parents that she didn't want to go. It was pointless. They made her to go, and a few days later, she was on the bus with among others to the Camp Everfree. She in fact sat by herself in the back part of the bus and tried to look at the window, and she did glance to see that Sandalwood was talking to some other friends in front of the bus. Even when they arrived to Camp Everfree, Principal Celestia and Vice Principal Luna, they had made plans for the activities going to happen. Trixie ended up in the same cabin with Rarity, by just two of them, Even she didn't mind though, because Rarity was a good friend of hers. But even during her time at the camp, she acted standing preferred to be alone. In fact, even when she was paired up with Rarity or among others during the camp activities, especially one time when she ended up paired with Sandalwood. Even she didn't want to at first be with him, but she had to at least to try to handle those feelings. And even at her time at the camp, no one actually was even talking about that they didn't seem to be spending any time with each other. It turns out no one actually wasn't even aware about the breakup between Sandalwood and Trixie. But that was not much change, because when Flash had noticed that Sandalwood was spending more time with some others, with his like friends, but not with Trixie. So when Sandalwood was alone, he actually walked up to Sandalwood and asked why would he isn't spending any time with Trixie, his own girlfriend of all. But Sandalwood explained they actually broke up the same day when the when their summer vacation had started. That shocked Flash. No one actually was even aware about it. Turns out even Sandalwood hadn't even wanted to be telling anyone about it because he felt lonely himself, or at least hurt. He still cared about Trixie. And Flash did ask what was the reason why they broke up in the first place. Seems they both were actually seems to be very happy together. But Sandalwood that his feelings for Trixie has slowly faded away over time for last week they were together. Even though he still cared about her, but he tried to move on. And he asked Flash not to tell anyone about this because he didn't want to start any drama at the camp, in which Flash kept his promise. So the rest of the summer camp at the camp everything went well, even though despite that Trixie felt lonely. But was going to be a bit different from her afterwards. Even they actually, when the camp was over about just 2 weeks before the school was started again, Trixie decided to maybe to spend time with some of her friends, just try to move on. But even this breakup still hurts her heart. She tried to move on, but it wasn't easy. But this point, it just was only 2 weeks before the start of the school was about to start. No one has still had even become aware about this breakup, which was really surprising because most of the time, friends at the school were always talking about something. But maybe that Sandalwood and Trixie had decided maybe they'd spend some time for themselves, which wasn't even that uncommon within relationships. So Trixie's friends and even Sandalwood's friends didn't actually talk much about it. But when school started again, things was actually looking forward to Trixie. She was actually had looking forward to go back to school, finish her school, studies, things like that. But then it was then people started to notice Trixie was actually never ending spending time with Sunwood, even at the lunch breaks or even during on the recess. So start soon people start to ask Trixie why she didn't even spending time with Sunwood. But she didn't at first she didn't even want to acknowledge any of that. But at the end, she explained that Sandalwood broke up with her just before the summer vacation had started, just even a week before Camp Everfree. Every of the friends were really shocked when they actually heard that happened. They were shocked. They couldn't even believe it. But Trixie said that maybe there was things that were going to happen. Maybe they weren't meant to be with each other. At least they tried. And she was really happy to at least that she tried to, at least to be with Sandalwood. And she had respected his wishes and they had remained good friends. Even it was quite awkward for them to even be near each other, especially for Trixie. But she still tried to at least to work it out. Even for most of her friends was really surprised of this. Even most of her friends was surprised all of it. But even for Trixie, things for her was not going to be the same afterwards. As the rest of the year was going on, things was turns out to be a little bit better for Trixie. She started focusing more on her studying rather from being dating. But some things was going to happen because just shortly after about maybe 2 months and school had started, she started to realize something was different. She felt lonely more. Even though she started hanging out more with some of her friends more often, but despite her spending time with her friends, the emptiness in her heart could not be filled with her friends, but she was actually felt lonely more because as she was walking around in school, she saw some of the other students actually had a boyfriend or girlfriend. Flash was once again dating Sunset Shimmer, and even Twilight has a boyfriend by the name Timber Sprouts. Even Rainbow was dating Soren. Even most of her friends actually had someone in their life. Seeing all of this actually made it very hurtful. She wanted to have a boyfriend, but she didn't exactly don't know what to do. So she one afternoon she actually walked up to Rarity, asking her for advice because she knows that Rarity herself was not dating anyone, and Rarity was more of like acting as a true lady, and she was more into fashion. Even though she spent time with her friends and their boyfriends, but she wanted to have her opinion, what to do, and how to find the new boyfriend. So Rarity had decided to maybe help Trixie. She had an advice or suggestions that maybe Trixie could start trying to have to wear something else that was what she regularly would wear at the school, maybe something more cute. Even Trix herself was a little bit doubt about that idea, but she was willing to give it a try. So she had some ideas by Rarity that to meet her after school, to go to her shop, to say maybe to find something that could fit for the new some sort of outfit for Trixie. So Rarity was waiting outside school with Trixie by her car. When Trixie came out, she still was a little bit skeptical about this idea, but she was willing to try anything. So they decided rather go to her to Rarity's shop. They decided to go to the mall of all other places. After all, the mall had at least two clothing stores which had could offer more opportunity. So they went to the first store. Rarity actually gave some of her at least some of the things that she might think that Trixie would look cute in. Even that some of the clothes that Trixie tried, she admit some of them actually was pretty cute, and even though they personally maybe not wouldn't fit her personality likewise, but she managed to get at least two outfits from the first store, and they went to the second store. There she tried at least a couple of things, but she only found at least one outfit that might work for her. Afterwards, she thanked Rarity for her help, and Rarity said that she always helped her friends in need of anything. Even on the road, the ride home, they were silent. They were just listening to the radio, and then Trixie came across her mind and asked Rarity why she hasn't found a boyfriend herself. If she is a very, that she is very good looking, very cute herself, she's not as much as a rude person. She probably would have had many. many boys that would like to date her. Even though Rarity admit there were some boys that she wanted, some who wanted to date her, but she didn't want to date them as herself because she rather being focused on her school and her shop and something like that. But she admits she do want to find somebody, someone to be with. But at first it seems to be a little bit difficult for her because she normally would go to someone who has a particular standards in her mind. She didn't want to go with someone who is acting different. But at further point, she were in fact interested in one boy by the name Blueblood, who was in fact the nephew of Principal Luna, Celestia, and Vice Principal Luna. Trixie was aware of that, but it turns out that Blueblood already had a girlfriend, so Rarity had to give up her hopes to be with him. And after that, Trixie was dropped out of her home. She begged once again to Rarity for help, and they said goodbye. And but the same evening, as Trixie was standing on her own, trying some of the new outfits that she had picked out with help of Rarity, she decided to wear one of them to school by the next day, and maybe hope this might draw attention to some other boy that she might be able to date. Even though when she went to school the next day in the new outfit, she was quite nervous because she had no idea how this reaction to be boys would be. Even though she had hoped that she could go back to Sandalwood again, but in the end, she maybe had hoped to maybe find someone to like him. But when she came to school, though, she did notice that some boys and girls was looking at her, said hi to her, and they said that she looked different, that she looked very cute in her new outfit, and they liked it. And she smiled, and for the first time, though, she felt like more confident. She had more confidence herself. And in fact, one of the students by the name Norman, who who actually said to Trixie that she looked quite amazing in her new outfit. And for the first time ever since her breakup with Sandalwood, she blushed and even said that she thanked him. And then he asked her if she had any plans for this weekend. She was amazed that he actually had asked her. But she said no, she didn't have any plans for this weekend, and he didn't ask if she maybe wanted to go out with him on a date to the movies, perhaps. She, at first, though, was really surprised, but she said yes, that she would like it. So he said that he will pick her up at her place around 5 p.m. After that, she nodded and he walked away. She actually walked to her own locker and stood there for a brief moment and felt like the whole world had just stopped. Ever since her breakup with Sandalwood, Norman, another one of her friends, actually had asked her out. But then something else kicked in. What if this date just going to be just one date and nothing more? But she told herself not to think like that, not to think doubts about this new potential boyfriend with Norman. So the rest of the day, she actually was looking forward to date on Friday with Norman. And even some of her friends had noticed that she smiled a bit more, and she explained the reason. They all just smiled and laughed, smiled, and just was really excited for her. But they could see that something was on her mind rather from just smiling. She explained that she may have some doubts if this might be a new relationship, considering that she had just left one only not so long ago. But her friends, along with Rarity, said, don't think like that. Go for it. See if it works, and then it works. So the rest of the week, Trixie actually had a great time with her friends, and even as every single day was getting closer and closer to Friday, she was really excited. And on a Friday afternoon, Trixie was waiting outside school for Norman. And Norman walked up to her and said that he would pick her up as planned at 5 p.m., which she said yes. And even at home, Trixie was really excited. For the first time, she had no idea what's going to happen. She made various scenarios in her mind, like this might just be one single date, or it might be a new relationship. But she made a various scenarios like what's gonna happen if she said something bad, so if she would say something wrong or do something wrong, and made up that this could not be a new relationship. But she told herself not to think anything like that because she want to ruin a new potential relationship with someone. So just before 5 p.m., she decided to pick one of the new red outfits that she picked out with Rarity. And she picked one, and just at 5 p.m., there was a knock on the door, and Trixie's dad opened it, and he was aware that Trixie was going on a date with Norman. She could hear that Trixie's dad was talking to Norman, some just simple questions like what they were going to do, and what time was going to expect to be back, and stuff like that. And Trixie's dad wasn't even like interrogating him, just asking some more just simple questions like what it was if they had something else planned for do after the movies, like having dinner or anything like that. And Norman said that they might go for something to eat. It depends, of course, if Trixie wants to. And when he saw Trixie, he was smashed in the face of like of pure happiness. He even said to Trixie that she looked amazing. And they then went off to the movies. Even at the car ride, it was silent for a moment, but they started talking about this movie, what they thought was going to happen. There was a brand new movie, a comedy one, which both actually thought was a good one to choose. Even on the car ride, Trixie felt like she had butterflies in her stomach. She tried to be calm, but it wasn't easy. She really liked Norman. Norman was really handsome, and he was very polite and very generous. So at the movies, they actually sat down and had a great time. Of all these things was going to happen, things turns out to be a little bit different than that they actually had in mind. Even the movie itself was just amazing. They both laughed a lot about it. They even afterwards. About an hour later, he asked Trixie if she was hungry, which she were, so they decided to go to a small diner that was just around the corner to have something to eat. There, they talked about the movie, what they thought about it, what was the good parts and some bad parts, but in the end, both actually had a good time. And was when he drove back Trixie to her home, he then asked her if she had a good time, which she said yes, and she then said that she might even would go out with him again if he wanted to. And his smile is that I will think about it. And that wasn't a yes or no, and it's potential. So she gave him a kiss on the cheek and said thanks for the date, and she went home. But the next day, she got a text message from Norman. She was expecting that he said that he didn't want to go out with her again, but since he didn't say yes or no the day before, But this was something that she had in mind, that maybe there was a 50-50 chance, like 50-50 chance that he was turned down. But in her disguise of her opposite course in mind, he said yes. He would like to go out with her this day, today, for maybe to go to the go to the cafe to have something to eat, and afterwards I can maybe take a walk in park and just hang out. And she said yes. So she quickly went to the park, to the cafe that was only about a few blocks away from her home. She was waiting, and Norman showed up in his car. She greeted him, gave him a hug, and they went inside. In fact, he let her decide for both of them to have, and he paid. They actually had a good time there also. They still talked about about the movie they felt about it, and that Trixie said that she really had a good time. Ever since the breakup with Sandalwood, she had felt lonely, and I felt maybe that she wouldn't find anyone else to be with. But it was the thanks to Trixie, like, the Rarity, that she said, and had helped her to pick out some of the new outfits. And but then Norman stopped her. He said it wasn't the new outfit that made him want to go out with her, because he had wanted to go out her without her for at least a while now. But since she was already in a relationship with Sandalwood before, he didn't want to say that to her because he didn't want to ruin her first relationship with Sandalwood. But since after that became to know and knowledge that she and Sandalwood were no longer a couple, and he respected that, give her some time to try to move on, and maybe then ask her at some point later on, maybe, if she was ready. In fact, he waited long enough that to even want to go on with her, and she smiled and said that was really a gentleman. She couldn't even believe that he actually was patient enough to wait so long to even ask her out. But she said that she was really happy. And after they left the rest of the cafe, they went to the park to sit down and just enjoy the rest of the day together. In fact, they spent time at the park for nearly 4 hours. They actually came to the cafe at noon, and they spent 4 hours in that park, talking, just hanging out, and he even offered to drive her home, which she said yes. But outside her home, though, she asked him if he wanted to be her boyfriend, which he smiled and said yes. For the first time in a while, she felt like her having a butterfly in her stomach and her heart was racing, and she actually gave him a kiss. Their first official kiss. The very next couple of days later on at school. It didn't have take long for everyone at school was aware about Trixie and Norman being dating. Especially her friends was really happy that she may have found a new boyfriend. Even though that she was a little bit cautious about this, maybe this relationship perhaps would even last particularly long, but she would try to do as best as she could. And it soon turns out this relationship with Norman for Trixie was getting better, even though her first one lasted for only 4 weeks. But this one lasted much longer. For even at the end of the year, of around Christmas, he even gave her a small gift, a necklace, which she loved so much. And she gave him a scarf, which he liked. And this potential new boyfriend, this relationship was getting stronger for each single day. But then, around just 2 weeks before Valentine's Day the next year, something did happen. Trixie was waiting outside school for her boyfriend Norman. They had made plans to go to a cafe to just spend the time with each other. But things was not going to happen as they had planned. Norman walks out from school and seeing that Rarity and Trixie was waiting for him with a smile, was hoping that just to get ready to hop in his car and go to this cafe. But when she saw him, his face was not the smiling that she normally had, more like a sad look, and she thought maybe something had happened. So she asked him if something had happened, if something was wrong, because she was a bit worried now. He explained they were something they needed to talk about. And this was the same thing that happened when she was dating Sandalwood. And she was not expecting this. For some reason, he explains to her that he didn't want to be with her anymore. Because for some reason he didn't felt much in love with her. He tried to make this calmly as possible. But for the first time, Trixie was smiling at first when she saw him, but now she had a big sad smile. She had a very sad look in her face. Norman was expecting that she might smack his face because, are you breaking up with me like that? But that never happened. She just stood there and then she just turned around and ran away from school ground and cried. She was crying all the way back home. She was very devastated. She was actually thought maybe this relationship with Norman could be the one she was been looking for. But it wasn't. She didn't stop crying even when she got home. She ran to her room, lay in her bed, started crying even more, and asked herself why it is happening. First Sandalwood, and now Norman? What's going on? Is something wrong with me? She decided maybe this wasn't the right thing to do. So, but the next week, when she went to school, she decided to wear some old outfits again. In fact, she told herself maybe these new outfits that Rarity gave her wasn't the right ones, that maybe it wasn't the right type of her style. So she decided to keep wearing her old outfits again. And this time though, after this, everyone at school had become aware of the second breakup. This time, Trixie had decided to keep distant from everyone, including her own friends. Even when they tried to talk to her, she just shut down every conversation they tried to have with her. And even during lunch breaks, rather than sitting by her friends, she just sat by herself. But if any of her friends tried to sit down with her, she just stood up and walked away to another table to be alone. At first, her friends tried to even try to reason with her, but after a while, they all gave up. They needed to, they actually decided to give her the space that she needed. Things was actually seems to be getting worse for Trixie. First was Sandalwood, and next Norman. What's next going to happen? Another breakup? Or another losing of friends? But it came to her mind she shouldn't punish her friends because of her second breakup. So the next couple of weeks after this had happened, she sat down in the lunch break in the cafeteria. She saw that some of her friends like Rarity, Trix, Sunset Shimmer with Flash was sitting having lunch together. She walked up to them and asked if she could sit down with them. She was expecting that they would just turn around and just ignore her, but they actually said yes. At the first thing she said that she apologized how she acted towards her friends, especially to Rarity. She explained that after the second breakup she had, she felt like there was like the whole world was against her. Like that there was something against her to having a relationship with anyone. Like It's like there was something meant was stopping her from having a happy relationship, like she was cursed or something. But Sunset said there are such things as curses. Curses are something that people just believe to be real, but they aren't. And even Fat said, maybe you had a bad luck in yourself. Look at me, for example. Me and Sunset, we were dating once, but we had also been very heartbreaking. And I took it very hard when she left me just for no reason. And look at us. Even I was giving her a second chance, and we have been strong together ever since. Everyone has a bad luck in relationship. You may found maybe end up dating and having maybe one or two or maybe three bad relationship with someone, but this is something part of life. And even Rarity admits that it is possible that maybe that it is part of life, but everyone has maybe one or two bad relationships in their lives. Rarity said she may found someone else to be with, just to be herself. And Rarity said that while having her hand on Trixie's hand and said, you will find someone. As long as you are open and don't judge yourself for the bad relationship, always looking forward. There will be someone there for you. And Rarity had a point. But even though that Trixie herself was not ready to get into the dating world again, just because that Norman break up with her, because then it doesn't have to be needing at the end of her finding her true love or to find happiness. But Trixie is then she may not even isn't going out to be into the dating world for at least a while now. After her second breakup so recently, she had decided maybe it was not worth it being rushing in to find someone else to be with. She wanted to find the right person when she was ready, not to be asked out again. And the others understood. Even though that she was asked out a couple of times by some of the boys in school, like Bulk Bicep, and even Microchef, but she turned them down gently, saying that she wasn't ready for a new relationship with anyone. But there was something else on her mind though. Ever since her friend, even after since her that she apologized to her friends at the cafeteria, things actually started to change for Trixie. There was something on her mind. Rarity. Ever since Rarity said that, she felt maybe Rarity was right. But she didn't want to go into dating world at the moment because she preferred to be waiting, maybe to wait. Maybe this right person might find her, or she might find that person. But just only 2 days after that, she had apologized to her friends. That night, she had a dream that she was standing by an altar in a wedding dress. She was getting married, but as she was waiting, looking to see then her partner would be. She was expecting to be a boy, but as she turned around and saw there wasn't a boy, it was in fact a girl. But it was someone that she really knew very much well. It turned out to be none other than Rarity. It turned out Rarity was the one she was getting married in her own dream. Trixie woke up immediately. She was just sitting in her bed, just asking herself, what is this dream meant? Is this something, just a random dream? Or does it mean something? But she didn't pay much attention to it. So she tried to go back to sleep and had a different dream that one. But for the next couple of days after that night, she could still continue to have some dreams about her and Rarity. At first, it was just that they were hanging out at the park or they were at the beach just having a picnic together. But then the dream of them getting married, and one dream they were having, they were married. and they were having children together of their own family. She was getting a bit strange about these dreams, but she never mentioned this to anyone, not even some of her friends, because she had no idea what they could have meant. But even after about a week of some of these dreams appearing randomly at night, she started to wonder, could these dreams actually have some meaning? She wanted to ask someone that might be not judging her or not to tell anyone about this. But she was wondering who could she tell or even ask. At least one person she ruled out immediately, and that was Rarity. Because she didn't want to embarrass herself in telling Rarity directly. She had been having dreams about her. So there came only one person in mind that she could talk to, Sunset Shimmer. She decided to go to Sunset Shimmer's apartment on Saturday, just to ask her if they could talk. So in fact, she called her the same afternoon, the early noon. She called and asked if she could come over. There was something that she needed to talk about her with something. Sunset didn't mind, so she said, sure, you can come over. So Trixie went to Sunset Shimmer's apartment, and at first they had small talk, but then when Sunset asked, you came by here, do you want to talk to me about something? So, what is it? At first, Trixie first felt maybe this was a bad idea, and maybe was just to go home. But she told herself in her mind, no, stay. You need answers. Sunset might help you. She may not be the best, but she may have a potential solution, or maybe answer what this could meant. So Trixie took a deep breath and then asked if Sunset was good in um, if she could tell what maybe dreams could meant, or if they had some particular meanings. Even though Sunset said some often dreams that doesn't even sometimes not necessarily had any particular meaning. But then Trixie said, what if someone would have a dream about someone else, like maybe as a close friends, and let's say, for example, if you would end up having dreams with you and Flash before you were even dating a second time, if you were like, if he appeared in your dreams, maybe randomly for quite often. At first, you're just hanging out, and then you're seeing him perhaps getting married to you, and you two have a family together. What would you tell those dreams could mean? Sunset was a little bit surprised, but she said, "Well, those dreams may just be random things, or maybe mixed up hopes and perhaps dreams that I have to see with him. But if that happened to me, but if this kind of things had happened to others, well, in my opinion, there might be some sort of maybe signs of this a potential future could happen." Why? Why do you ask? She asked. Trixie was a bit was really surprised at that answer, but she decided to say, "I can't tell you something, but can you promise me not to tell anyone else?" And and Sunset promised. And Trixie then was silent for only a brief moment, but then she said to Sunset that she had been having dreams with someone particular, and at first Trixie didn't want to say exactly who, but if she wanted to have some help with this to get a sense what this dream spur had, what it could mean. So she took a deep breath and said it was about her and Rarity. And she even explained what has happened in those particular dreams. First was just that she was getting married, and then that they would have to spend time, and then they were married and having a family together. and she didn't know exactly what these dreams could mean. First, when it first happened the first time, she believed maybe this was just a random dream. But since those dreams had occurred randomly but often, she was getting worried about these dreams can actually mean something. But then she had to ask herself, who can she ask who maybe can help her to make sense what those dreams could mean, or if they had any meaning at all, or they just something happened randomly. So she came to conclusion to ask Sunset. And when she looked at Sunset, she was really happy, so big surprise that she actually had those dreams. But she didn't mention those dreams meant perhaps they had a meaning, but Sunset then asked, how did she feel after when she wakes up, when she had these dreams? And if she like having a heart racing, or if she felt like just normal. Mention about that though, she remembers that she each time when she wakes up, she had a very hard her heart was racing faster than normal. When she mentioned that to Sunset, she came to the real conclusion these dreams were somehow glimpse into the future somehow. And it's possible that Rarity and Trixie were meant to be. And then Sunset asked if Trixie had ever tried to even telling Rarity about these dreams. And in fact, so she said no. Sunset was the only one who was even aware of these dreams. Because she didn't want to tell Rarity or anyone before because she had no idea how the others would even react, especially Rarity. She would be feeling embarrassed if she tells something. But now something else came to Trixie's mind. She started to cry because she remembers she actually thought maybe the Rarity would not even to be with someone like her because she perhaps was not even into girls in the first place. And in a thought that made her to realize maybe Rarity would never be with someone like her, like because of this being not because she is of the type of person she is, but that she is in fact a girl. But Sunset realized something was wrong, and she tried to calm Trixie down, even despite her trying to make it work. But it was at first almost like pointless to even calm Trixie down. But then Sunset snapped and said, Trixie, calm it down! She literally screamed. And that shocked Trixie a bit, and she actually started crying for a moment. Listen, Trixie, Rarity would never do anything like that. I'm her friend, and she trusts me, and I trust her. If you really have some feelings for for Rarity, why have you not even taken the chance to tell her? I know this might be embarrassed if you're telling Rarity and that she might not even be into girls, but you would never know if you don't even tell or ask her. If you were like had a crush on me, for example, and you had told me if I was single, I probably had said yes. I would like maybe try to go out with you, but in this case, Rarity will not reject anyone in such bad manners because I know for sure Rarity is not that type. After all, we all know that she is more like a lady, not rather being such rude person. And Trixie realized that Sunset had a point. Rarity has never been rude to anyone. She preferred to be more calmly acting like a lady rather than being a such rude person. But Trixie said, what if she doesn't even like me the same way back? Maybe that's maybe I am supposed to not be with someone then. Trixie, how could you even think of that? Do you think that maybe someone like you would ever end up being with someone? Maybe. But I don't believe any of that. You're supposed to be with someone. And if since those dreams about you and Rarity, maybe they are meant to show you the potential future you could have with her, like have you get married and have a family. Maybe those dreams are in fact views from the future, or at least a potential one. Are you trying to say tell yourself not to just ignore them and just not want to even tell Rarity how you feel? Even if you would tell me and not to tell anyone, I wouldn't even do that. But if you want to tell Rarity how you feel, you should do that on your own. Or at least take courage enough to even to tell Rarity. Even with the chance that you might be rejected by her, you wouldn't even know for sure if you don't tell her. So listen to me now, Trixie. You need to be calm. How do you think how do you think Flash, for example, how he felt when I decided that I broke up with him? Hurt? Exactly. So if he had asked me out again, maybe just a year later, and I was the same person as before, do you think I would have said yes? And Trixie shook her head and said no. Exactly. That's the same feeling that you could have. But when I was asked by Flash about a while back, when he asked me to be his girlfriend again, I felt happy. I want to be with him. So maybe if you don't have this courage, but you might have it, just not really realize it. So what you do, ask yourself, do you want to be with Rarity? Do you want to be with someone like her? Are you brave enough? Are you? And Trixie realized that Sunset may had a point. Even if she doesn't even ask Rarity or even tell her how she felt, maybe then she will one day it will be maybe she will lose the opportunity. Because and who knows? Because then Sunset said, even if you don't tell her now, who knows what if she starts dating someone else and maybe they will end up getting married at some point after school. And then you have lost your chance of even telling Rarity. Have you even think about that as an ending? And that made her to cry even more. But Trixie realized that Rarity was the one that she wanted to be with. And she said that she might think about this, and thanked Sunset for her help, and then left. On her way back home, though, Trixie was thinking about this potential idea that she would end up dating Rarity. But even though she first didn't wanted to lose someone else that she cared about. After what happened to her first with Saddlewood and Norman, and now that she had a potential of a future with Rarity, if she tells her, there was a lot of conflict in her own mind, in her own heart, and her feelings towards Rarity are just getting stronger and stronger. And now she realized that she had feelings, a crush on one of her close friends, which turned out to be Rarity. But what would she do? Should she even tell Rarity how she really felt for her? Or just try to ignore those feelings and just maybe wait to see if she could find someone else to be with? But then she came to a realization she needs to tell Rarity. But she didn't know exactly how, or who, or how, or when. But then she realized maybe this was the right thing to do. So when she got home, she texted Rarity, asked her if they could meet. There was something that she wanted to talk to her about. And Rarity said sure, she could pick her up. At that moment, Trixie still had a chance to tell Rarity that maybe that something came up with that they maybe had to do that if they could talk some other day. But as Rarity's car was coming down the street, now she realized there was no point to even, it was too late to tell Rarity that she couldn't come because now was standing outside Rarity and Trixie's home. So Trixie took the courage that she had, walked out to the car, hopped in, and they took off to a cafe nearby home. At first, they were just talking about random things, but then when Rarity said that there was something that Rarity Trixie wanted to talk about, and at first Trixie tried to avoid the question, but she realized it was pointless because Trixie needed to tell Rarity. So first, she told her about some of the previous relationships, which Rarity was aware of, but then Trixie said that she had been having some dreams for about a week or two, and that those dreams were involved her and Rarity. Rarity was a little bit surprised, but then asked what those dreams were about. And Trixie just mentioned some parts that was happening, like they were dating, they were getting married, they were married and have a family together. And as she mentioned those things, details to Rarity, Trixie could see that Rarity's face was just like curious to just big eyes, and then maybe didn't realize Rarity was not into girls at all. But then Trixie was really surprised that something snapped, like something just changed. Like the entire environment in where they were sitting was just like thick cloud, but then something felt like there was sunlight. Trixie, are you meaning? Are you saying that those dreams were about us? She said, and Trixie just nodded. But then tells her that just before she spent time with her at the cafe, she went to see Sunset because she wanted to have Sunset's opinion of what those dreams could mean, if they had any particular meaning at all. And Sunset said to her that those dreams maybe meant that they were supposed to be with each other, and those dreams were a potential future if Trixie was brave enough to even embrace those true meaning and to tell Rarity those true purpose. And Rarity was really surprised though, because she was really happy that to at least know, and Trix herself felt at least a little bit more excited, but also relieved that now she had those thoughts about herself out in the open. She had now finally had revealed her true feelings towards Rarity. But then, but then it came to that realization that Trixie may be turned down by Rarity on the spot. She was expecting it, but nothing that happened. Rarity smiled and said, and that in fact, for the past few weeks, ever since her breakup with Norman, she'd been having some thoughts about her, even Trixie. And even then, Trixie said that why didn't you tell her? Rarity herself said that she wasn't even sure if those were romantic feelings or what was she was concerned about her, and that what those two past relationships that breaks up with her with Sandalwood, Norman. She was just she thought maybe those were just feelings that she felt concerned about Trixie, and that she was concerned about her one of her friends felt lonely, hurt, and maybe those weren't those supposed type of dreams or feelings. But now she realized, after that Trixie revealed her true feelings for Rarity, she came to realize that she actually had a crush on Trixie. Even that she didn't have any didn't she didn't even realize it until that moment. And then they actually said, if Trixie said, if you are willing to maybe, I don't know, try to go out, see if we can, if something is a spark between us. Rarity smiled and said that she would like that. So they decided to go to the mark, to the movies. Just have a good time there. And Rarity said that she will pick her up around 4 p.m. On Saturday the next week. Oh, yeah, that sounds okay, said Trixie. and they enjoyed the rest of their time at the cafe. And the rest of the week, that next week, they came. Things between Rarity and Trixie at the school were just like normal. They were just having good time. They small talk from time to time, but they didn't even mention this to any of their friends. What was going to happen on Friday, except for Sunset, because Rarity and Trixie told her in person that they were going to date, but they asked Sunset not to tell their friends about this because they didn't want to give them false hopes, just in case. Which Sunset agreed. But on Saturday came though. Trixie was a little nervous how her second, absolute very first date with Rarity would go, but those feelings were really much was really it was in fact really unnecessary because as she said saw Rarity, she felt relaxed for some unknown reason. But at the movies though, they actually had such great time. They snuggled at each other's arms when having watched this movie together, and even went to this small diner in right the corner of the rest of the movies. There, they actually had such a great time also. Just talking about the movie, what they thought about it, and but then Rarity asked if Trixie wanted to go out with her again, and Trixie said yes. So for the next couple of times they actually went out on a date. It wasn't until the third date when they told their friends about this. And they were surprised because when they said, why didn't you tell us in the first place? After the first date? Or you did it the first before then? We didn't want to tell you because we didn't want to give you such false hopes, said Trixie. And Sunset only knew about it. Sunset? And the other said yes, but she made a promise not to tell, which they had agreed to accept. So for the rest of the year, everything was well between them. Even though Rarity was really happy, but there was some doubts, some question in Trixie's mind. Ever since then, her second relationship with Norman ended around Valentine's Day that same year. She had really some doubts that some question herself. Will her relationship with Trixie and with Rarity end sometime early next year? She didn't mention these doubts to anyone, not even Rarity. At least at first, but she did brought up those doubts to her. But Rarity said that she would never leave Trixie. Regardless what they have going to happen, she will always try to work it out. And after the holidays was over and school was back to normal, every day after school, Trixie was waiting outside for Rarity so they could spend time before that Rarity had to go to a shop or go home. Every time when she was waiting, she was expecting maybe that Rarity one day would walk out from school with a sad face, but that actually never came. Even when even when Valentine's Day came around, they actually went to have a dinner, romantic dinner, and it's a great time. It actually marked a first time relationship for the Trixie. And especially when summer came around. After around done summer break, with summer vacation, Trixie was invited by Rarity to go on camping along with her friends. Even Trixie was herself has never been on a camping like that before, except for Camp Everfree. But she accepted the invitation and she didn't even regret that decision at all. She had such a great time. Even that she even though the evenings they were all telling ghost stories and Rarity felt really excited. Even in mind that she was really happy that she did invite Trixie. Even though Trixie and Rarity shared a tent together. But they all agreed that this was the best time they ever could have wished for, especially that her friends actually liked them being together. Even Rarity herself was really happy, and even particularly special time the first time when Rarity had invited Trixie over for dinner with her parents and her sister Sweetie Belle. Trixie was a little bit nervous how this first meeting with Rarity's family would go, even though she already knew about even though she was a friend of Sweetie Belle, but she was still very curious, a little bit nervous how the first meeting with Rarity's parents would go. If they would even like her the same thing, or if there's going to be like too much awkward feelings. But she didn't think much about it. It actually went just great. But then things was going to happen. Because just before summer vacation was about to end, there was only about 3 weeks left of summer vacation. Rarity and Trixie had made plans to see each other at the park just to hang out, spend some time. But Trixie had decided to go to the park just maybe a little bit earlier, maybe like 10 minutes early before Rarity arrives. But something would, in fact, happen. As Trixie was about to cross the street just to the park, she heard this approaching car. The car, she just only for a brief second, she closely turned around. At just that single moment, the car hit her, and she flew onto the car hood and on the ground, and the car stopped. And everything went dark after for Trixie's mind. Because that brief second after she hit the ground, she looked up and everything went dark. And it was after happened afterwards. It turns out the car that hit Trixie was in fact in a hurry. And it turns out there was a man and his wife in the car. She was in a labor and she was in fact going to the hospital. But as they turned around the corner at the park, the husband tried to avoid hitting, tried to hit the brake before he hit Trixie, but it was too late. The car hit her. It turns out that after that, at first maybe people believed that this was on purpose or that he was drunk or something. But when they found out that he was trying to take his wife to the hospital before the baby was even arriving, because she was in such pain in the labor. So people didn't blame that. But same day as that happened, Rarity was in fact arrived at the park at the time that this was supposed to meet. She waited for Trixie for maybe like 5 minutes after they're supposed to be arriving, but no signs of her. So she tried to text Trixie, no response. She tried to call her 3 times, but nothing. It's like she never even responded at all. She started to get worried about something if maybe Trixie had forgotten the time they were supposed to meet. But as she was about to call a fourth time, a call came into Rarity's phone, and it was from Sunset. It turns out when Sunset mentioned something about what happened, she Rarity said that she was at the park, was waiting for meeting for Trixie. But then her jaw dropped. Her eyes started being tearful eyes. Sunset revealed to Rarity Trixie wasn't even coming. She was in the hospital. She had been in a car accident. And she didn't bring the right words, but as she said, Rarity, the doctors may say that Trixie may not, but Sunset didn't have to bring those words out. Because Rarity only knew what she was going to say. Rarity then dropped the phone on the ground and she started crying even more. She realized that Trixie was in fact in hospital after a car accident because she did see an ambulance just left the scene of near the park just before she arrived. She thought maybe it was something about something else, but then after she heard was that where this accident took place, and then she put the spot on it, the ambulance near the park just before she arrived. She came to the conclusion: Trixie was in fact in the same ambulance was left to see. Because Trixie Rarity first believed that this ambulance came from somewhere else, but from some other place. But as then she realized after Sunset told her, she realized Trixie was in fact in that particular ambulance. And now she was in a hospital, and that what she was heard that Trixie may not even survive. She was crying, and she didn't know exactly what to do. But then something happened. She heard a voice. She quickly turned around, saw Applejack and Twilight rushing towards her. They told her to get up and go with them to the hospital because they should go there. But Trixie, Rarity, was beyond devastated. It was like she wasn't even hearing a word that was saying toward her. But Applejack said, Rarity, get out of it! Come with us! But nothing. Because Rarity just sat there, just looked at them. It was like she didn't hear a single word from them at all. She was just like, what? But Twilight said, get your phone and come with us. We need to go. Now. Rarity snapped out of it, and she followed her friends to the hospital. In the waiting room, she was greeting to Trixie's parents that they were both devastated by what happened. They had no idea about her condition. She was in fact in surgery at this moment. She tried to get some more information from Trixie's parents, but they didn't have any answer at all. After nearly 4 hours, the doctor came out and everyone was expecting the worst. But luckily the doctor said that Trixie made it, but she was in ICU. She was stable, but in critical condition. They might have to keep watching over her for the next couple of hours, for the next 12 hours or 24 hours, just to make sure that nothing serious happened. And in fact, it did. Because the same night, just around midnight, Trixie's heart stopped. And when Trixie's parents was told about this, they was devastated. But Rarity, she was not even aware about this until the day after. When she heard that, she thought Trixie was dead. But she wasn't. They managed to get Trixie's heart started again. Luckily for that. And now they had to keep her at the hospital for some time just to make sure that she would survive, make it through. Rarity was allowed to see Trixie at the hospital from time to time, but not particularly long because she couldn't even stand it to see her own girlfriend in a life support system at the hospital. But then, one evening, Rarity gets a call from Trixie's mom, stating Trixie had just left the ICU and now in her own room, and it turns out she was going to make it. She was getting stronger, and she had been conscious that particular day, and she asked for Rarity. And Trixie's mom said that she will be there tomorrow. And in fact, Trixie's mom actually picked up Rarity the next day at Rarity's home, took her to the hospital, and that she saw Trixie was awake. She was really happy to see that she was awake, that she almost had lost her. But she was just happy that Trixie made it. But the doctor said that Trixie may have to stay in the hospital for another couple of days, maybe 2 weeks more, just in case, because the severe of this accident were. And Rarity understood, but instead, Rarity went to see Trixie almost every single day at the hospital, sometimes along with Applejack, Twilight, or even with Sunset, or just sometimes herself. In fact, she made a promise. If Trixie made it, or had to leave the hospital soon, she would make sure to do the best thing for Trixie. And after about a few weeks, she was allowed to leave the hospital, but she was allowed given order by the doctor. She had to stay home for another couple of maybe another week from school, just to make sure that she is still rested and doesn't do anything health stressful. And of course, her mom let her stay home not just for 2 more weeks, and it was perfectly for that they needed. Even those 2 weeks when Trixie had to stay at home, Rarity actually went to see Trixie after school, and which Trixie actually enjoyed. They actually had so much fun together, even though that Trixie wasn't allowed to leave the home, at least go to school or something for about 2 weeks. But Rarity actually entertained Trixie with new stories about things that has happened when she was gone, and those 2 weeks as when she was had to stay home for 2 weeks from school or other, just to have to keep her updated what things has happened in school, and she just wanted to be informed. And Trixie was really happy to hear that some of her friends actually really missed her really much. And especially when she was in the hospital for some time, all of her friends actually came to see her and even gave her some flowers or cards. Even Sandalwood came to visit at her hospital. But at this point, Sandalwood and Trixie had made a dance with each other and became just remained as good friends. Even Norman had also came to see her at the hospital. He was just a bit worried about her after he heard what happened. But he actually was really happy that Trixie had found someone else to be with. And in fact, Trixie was just happy that he had forgiven her about what happened, and they also remained good friends. In fact, it was just one topic that Trixie and Rarity talk most about. That was in fact the prom. The prom was not supposed to happen within the next couple of months, but they were really happy to at least this one topic they actually want to look forward to. This will be the very first time they were going to have on the prom to be as a couple. But for Trixie, this will be the very first time she will go to the prom at all. Because the last year's prom, or at least school dance, she didn't go at all because she was sick at that time. But she wished that she could have gone. But she said to to Rarity, if she had missed out the prom this year, Trixie would have felt lonely, or at least devastated if she would have missed out this whole year's prom. But Rarity said if she would have missed the opportunity to go to prom with her, she wouldn't have minded that. Because she said if you would have missed out the prom, I would make sure we would have our own prom, along with help from my friends. That made Trixie smile and laugh a bit. I know that you would do that for me, she said, and both laughed about it. And 2 weeks later, Trixie was allowed to go back to school. Even though she had still some pain after the accident that she had, but she was still not allowed to go to the gym class, just because that some of her injuries hadn't had healed entirely. But she was having given permission not to be on that one. So during the gym class, she went to the library where she read or maybe just do some other homeworks or do some schoolwork. But when she did return back to school, though, She was just happy to be back, to spend time with her friends, just hang out, and just they all actually enjoyed her to be back though. But there was something was felt different because the first day when she came back to school, Rarity, she was not even at school at all that day, or at least that day. And Trixie was a bit worried, or at least curious why Rarity was even at school. But it later turns out that when she asks Sunset about it, it turns out that Rarity were in fact just at the dentist, and she had to do at her hospital for some regular check. Just so some like she had felt a little bit hurt for the past few days. In fact, that Saturday when Rarity was out for jogging with Sweetbell, she tripped and hurt her ankle. So there wasn't nothing serious, but she was just at least happy that Rarity wasn't in serious hurt. Because a couple of days later, Rarity returned, and she was just happy though. They actually spent a lot more time in school, and even the first weekend after that Rarity and Trixie had returned back to school, Rarity had asked if Trixie wanted to go with her for a picnic, and she said yes. So they went to the park. This time they actually went in Rarity's car. That they didn't want to jeopardize, they didn't want to risk that either of them getting hurt in a car accident, which both laughed. And but even despite that accident, their relationship between each other always remained strong. And in fact, it was only getting stronger for each single day. Their friendship had moved on to the next level in a relationship, which both actually enjoyed. And at the park, they just had a great time. They small talk about their some of the interests they had, and they even talked about some of their future dreams they had in their lives. Rarity said she had wished that she could be a fashion designer, someone like that, and Trixie had said that she wished that she could be a famous magic entertainment or at least work something with entertainment, something to entertain children. They actually said, regardless what happened, they always have each other. Even if Rarity would have to move across the world for her to have been offered opportunity to be a fashion designer, and that Trixie had to remain back home. Even when that topic came up, Trixie realized, regardless what happened, they would always try to work it out. And Rarity said yes upon that. And in fact, it did happen once that Rarity actually had thought about moving to another country to pursue her career as a fashion designer after she finished high school. But even that was the point before she was even had started dating Trixie. But Dad also realized that she had to close down her shop in Kansas City, which she preferred not to do because she loved her shop. Even though that Rarity said to Trixie, if she would have been given an opportunity, or at least a chance to work with some of the world famous fashion designers, to she she would have some of this her biggest dream to be just pursue it. But she had said to the Trixie that if that chance came to her, she would have declined the offer so she could stay in Capital City with true love Trixie. But Trixie, that she said, you wouldn't have to give up your own dreams to be with someone to pursue your own career if you wanted to. I wouldn't have been there. I wouldn't even be there to stop you so that you could pursue your highest dreams to be a fashion designer. But Rarity said even if she would be a fashion designer, even if to be a local one, she would be fine with that also. Because some dreams, and sometimes you have to give up them. Sometimes you have to give up some of your dreams and in order to pursue their some of the other strongest dreams. Because Rarity didn't mention during their picnic that even despite her one of her dreams to be was a famous fashion designer, but it was only one of the things that she wished she had highest dreams about: to be with the one she loved the most forever. Meaning, she would be willing to give up her childhood dream to be a fashion designer so she could stay in Capital City with the one that she loved the most. But Rick said if you would have to move across the world to pursue your dream in a fashion designer, I will be willing to go with you and pursue my dream to be an entertainment there. And even that was a strong possibility they both could do. But that was years away from them though. But they were even still talked about if they would end up moving to a different location in the future, or if they are still together. But Trixie said to Rarity, even if we aren't together in the future anymore, I will still be there to support you for your future career, even if you move across the world to be a fashion designer. I will always be there as your one of the biggest support ever. And that made Rarity smile. And to Rarity, though, she said the same thing because even that she said that if Rarity and her and Trixie wouldn't be long enough to be together, she would support and even follow up to even keep in check on to Trixie's career as an entertainer. Because she knows how much Trixie loves to entertain for others in magic shows or basic anything. And that made her to realize Trixie are in fact the one she was waiting for all along to be with. And then something did happen. And it was in fact a few weeks later they heard there's going to be a talent show just about maybe a week before the prom. And Trixie, she actually thought maybe if she would stand up there on this performance, but she did had no idea what to do during this performance, like if she would do some magic shows or anything else. But she actually had some thoughts about if she would even go take part of this talent show. But Trixie was told by Rarity that if she wanted to do that, she would be. But Trixie had asked Rarity if she was going to stand up in a talent show or apply for it, which she said yes. But Trixie asked if she was going to be with her friends to perform as like a with the Sonic Rainbow. But Rarity said no, she wasn't. She then in fact asked if Trixie would do a magic show and if she needed any particular help with that Rarity would be glad to be her assistant in that particular magic show at the talent show. And Trixie blushed when I said that, but she thought maybe that there was something they could do. So they both decided to sign up for the talent show together as a team. Even though when Rarity did mention this to their friends, they actually didn't mind that because the others had also other ideas. If they weren't going to perform as a band together, they would probably do something either themselves or just maybe something together as something else. And of course, they didn't mind that. So for the next couple of days after this, they had signed for the talent show. Trixie and Rarity met up at Trixie's home to train for this upcoming talent show because they wanted to be in practice because they didn't want to make sure there was nothing if there were going to be a sort of mistake. They wanted to make sure that their performance would be without any particular major or any mistakes at all. After they practiced for several days in a row, they made sure that the practice actually went up perfectly. They even practiced in front of either Trixie's parents or even for Rarity's parents or her sister. They actually said that this was actually a good performance. But they had made sure that Sweetie Belle and her friends, who also was invited to see this performance, not to reveal any details about their performance to the others at school, because they want to make sure that this is a secret, which they made sure that. On the day on the talent show, though, both Rarity and Trixie was there, and even Rarity herself was very excited, but Trixie otherwise. She was really, really nervous. She was so nervous that she was shaking, that she thought maybe this wasn't a good idea, and she tried to make an excuse so that she wouldn't have to be and go up on the stage. But Rarity, she managed to calm her down and managed to convince her to do it. Even if there were going to be some mistake, but as long as they're both together, it will be fine. Regardless if there's going to be a big mistake or if anything happened, people don't take that as a bad way. Everyone would make mistakes on the stage. And in fact, Trixie remembers during the last school's talent show a year earlier, there were in fact some other students who made some mistakes despite they practiced a lot in before that particular performance. So Trixie remembers that, and what she remembers, and even remembers the words what Rarity had said to her, and agreed. And in fact, when it was their turn, their performance actually went quite well. Even they made maybe one or two mistakes, but the audience, they didn't see that as a big failure. Of course, even some of the most world famous magicians or performers, they also make mistakes in their practice in their youth. Despite it that Trixie and Rarity didn't win, even though they ended up on the third place, which they actually didn't mind, even Rarity's friends, they didn't end up on, they actually went all together in one performance. Unfortunately, though, they ended up on the fourth place, but they didn't mind that. Even though Rainbow said, we will try the better next time. Next time, we will be the number one or the second place. But Applejack just smiled and said, yeah, Sugar Cube, we will try. But if we end up on the third place, it's good enough for me. And even Rarity and Trixie actually had such a great time. Even afterwards, when they were talking, and they actually even gave each other a kiss. And Trixie thanked Rarity for her confident words even before the performance, and she agreed. Even despite she realized that they made two mistakes during their performance. But the audience didn't even mention any of that. They all had actually sat there, and just enjoy the performance. Even some of them laughed, but they actually were cheering afterwards that the performance was over. They all cheered and said it was actually a good performance. Even Vice Principal Luna did stated afterwards, despite some of their mistakes they had, but they actually gave a good performance along the others. And that sparked an even more interest for Trixie, that she wanted to be a performer once when she leaves school. Even after all this, it was something that they both really enjoyed. But then, just a week later, the prom was approaching. It was only just about a few days before the prom was going to happen. Trixie, she didn't have got any dress for the prom or even Rarity. But luckily though, since Rarity was going to be with Twilight to get themselves a dress, so Fluttershy had offered her help to Trixie to help her to find the right dress. So even they just went to the mall, Trixie actually found a great dress, a blue with some stars on it, and she didn't even show that to Rarity because she wanted to have a surprise for her. They could so on a day, Trixie's dad took her to the prom. She was even there before Rarity. When she saw Rarity walking in this light blue dress, she was blown away of her beauty. When when Rarity saw Trixie though, she was the same thing. She was blown away, and especially seeing the blue dress with the stars on it. It was perfect choice. She said that to Trixie, and they actually really had us a great time there. Even they all had gone to vote for the king and the queen of the prom, but there were some talks about what if that Trixie and Rarity would end up being voted to be the supposed king and queen of the prom. But there would be a little bit, right, a little bit of trouble. There would be queen and queen of the prom, not the king. But they actually said if that happened, it would happen. But in fact, it didn't. Everyone actually voted for Sunset and Flash to be the king and queen of the prom. But Trixie and Rarity, though, they didn't even care if they didn't win to be that. As long as they had a good time at the prom and with the dancing, the food, and spending some time with their friends, that was all that matters to them. To them, the dance, everything was more perfect than anything else. Because regardless if they would be the show voted as the king and queen or queen and queen of the prom, they wouldn't even care. They wouldn't even mind at all. So even after prom was over, Trixie and Rarity was standing outside. It was just them alone, just waiting for Rarity's dad to pick them up. Because they had arranged that Rarity's dad would pick them up both at the prom. And as they were standing there, they just having a good time until something did happen that would frighten them for at least a while afterwards. As they were waiting for Rarity's dad to pick them up, this young man approached them from the street, or at least from the sidewalk, and he was just acting normal. He asked them how if they had a good time at the prom, apparently, and they both said yes. And he asked if there was anyone else in their life than except from them, but they said no, it was just themselves. But Trixie got a hang on something was different. That this guy was acting a bit different. Even though this guy is probably like in his early 20s or something. But she was on a very cautious mind. Even though if Rarity herself had even caught up something was wrong. But then, as this guy was just hadn't even moved any closer, which was a good thing for them though. He asked if they were waiting for someone to pick up but now Rarity was actually getting caught. Something was different when he acted that, and when he asked that particular question. Rarity said, "Yeah, my dad will be here in a minute." And then this guy actually said, "All right," but as he was turning around and supposed to walking away, he quickly turned around and pointing a weapon towards them and said, "Give me all the values you have." But they didn't have any values at all. They didn't have any purse with them. They had no wallets, only except for one thing. Rarity had a phone with her, but she had it hide so that the guy would even see it, and she had it in fact on the plane mode so that he wouldn't even hear it all. So the guy once again said, give me all your values. Valuable things you had. Anything. Phones, wallet, anything." But Trixie, she stood in front of Rarity and protecting her from anything on her heart. "Listen, do you see if we had anything valuable on us? We are in a dress. We don't even have a pocket. We don't even have any purse with us. Are you even seeing that? I don't care. Give me everything you have." But Rarity was about to almost thinking of give him the phone. But luckily though, Rarity's dad was approaching from the street and the guy did notice, and he actually took off. Luckily for that. And they immediately called for police. And luckily for them, they managed to find this guy, and it turns out he was high on drugs. And that was the end of that this small accident or terror they felt. But Trixie felt that no matter what happened, she would protect Rarity, even if it meant that she would sacrifice her own life. Rarity felt safe and even happy that never anything like that serious happened. But she was happy that Trixie was there to try to protect her from any harm. That only made her love for Trixie even stronger. And even Rarity's dad said to Trixie that he felt very proud to see someone actually very care about his own daughter so much. Even they said that when Rarity's mom found out, well, she was a little bit surprised but very terrified what happened. But she was just happy that this guy never had any harm to either Rarity or Trixie. The news about this incident actually came public, and soon everyone in the school, about a few days later, became aware of what has happened. But they were just terrified. This could have been lost that this guy could either rob or even shoot Trixie or Rarity, or worse, both of them. For what? For no any value, perhaps just a phone. But it turns out that never happened. Their relationship between Trixie and Rarity was just really strong. And Trixie, though, she'd had even stated to Rarity that she would never let anything harm her. Even it meant she would have to take a bullet to save or even protect her life. And that made Trixie very more lovable for Rarity. As a couple of days after this incident, soon everyone had forgotten about it. And even during the, the recess class around a few days later, Rarity actually was really happy that Trixie had made it happen. And in fact, it did happen that Rarity had asked if she wanted to go out on camping with her, just both of them, just on them alone. And of course, Trixie was a little bit curious and a little bit nervous, and she asked where they were going to camping. But it turns out that they weren't going to camp in a tent. In fact, they were in that Rarity's dad had a friend who owns a cabin just outside of the big capital city, which that Trixie and Rarity was allowed to be using for the weekend. And they actually had a good time. So they actually decided to go to this cabin for the sort of camping together. And that not only that, the cabin was not as far from a small lake, just maybe 5 to 10 minutes walk to the lake, which was a good thing. So they actually decided to go there, and when Trixie said yes, Rarity smiled and actually wrapped her arms around Trixie and gave her a kiss. She was happy that she was going to giving a chance to be with Rarity, just themselves. And since there was going to be one of the last few weeks of the summer before the winter rise. And of course, that was not a bad choice. Even though before Trixie's dad left them, it is that Rarity's dad dropped them off at the cabin, he'd made a promise to Rarity that he made them a promise to call him if there's anything they need or if something would be wrong. He will answer the phone regardless if it was middle of the night or middle of the day or if he was at work or anything. Rarity made a promise that she would do that if there was anything come in mind. And of course, nothing of that came to that. Because before they actually went to this cabin, Rarity and Trixie, along with Rarity's dad, have went to the store and bought some food and some of the things that they needed. And of course, that was nothing big deal. But during the time at this cabin, though, they just had a great time, spending a lot of it. Just go to the lake every day, just swing around, and lay on the beach, just enjoy their company. Even in the evenings when either Rarity or Trixie decided to cook for them. Even there weren't any TV at this cabin, but they didn't mind if they didn't have any TV, as long as they had each other's company. That was all that was mattered. Even especially for Trixie, though, she felt very excited and most of all, very, very happy to have someone in her life like Trix, like Rarity. Even after all that happened to her, this the small incident at the after prom, this car accident, and her two breakups in the past. Regardless of all the things that happened, but her relationship with Rarity had remained strong. She was just happy that this really has going on such strong moment. Regardless of what happened, Trixie was really happy that Rarity was the one that she really wanted to be with. Even when Trixie and Rarity came back to school a couple of days after their weekend at his cabin, they want to know the details of what has happened. If something bad had happened or something, but they both smiled that nothing is such serious happened. They had just a good time at this by being at the lake and during the day and going back to the cabin during the night, just playing cards or just having a good time, which was the best thing that has happened to them since after what happened at prom and the car accident. Rarity was just happy that they were able to spend time because, and who knows what else could happen in the future. But then, some things did happen. After that, they both finished high school though. Rarity was still working at her own shop, and Trixie though. She actually worked in a small store, little shop at the mall. This magic shop, which she actually didn't mind, and because there she could actually work to help other people to find the true things that they needed for some sort of any particular magic performance, or she even did in fact gave some ideas and tips how to make the training or is the mess of the magic performance good. And her boss actually didn't mind if Trixie did give some of the customers some ideas how to make the performance. And in fact, she even showed some of the children at the store how she made some of her own performance, and her boss actually was impressed. So he actually promoted her to store manager just after about maybe 2 months of working there. And that was something that Trixie was really surprised because even though she didn't mind, but gave her at least a small raise in payment, but that was good enough. But though, what about her and Trix and her Rarity's relationship? Well, it turns out they were still being together, even after all that after school was over. They didn't even live together yet, but they had made plans to move in together as soon as possible because they wanted to save up a little money just to manage to find a small place them together. And in fact, while Rarity was working and while Trixie was working, Trixie were in fact when she was either on her breaks or when she wasn't helping any customers, she were in fact looking on her on the computer during some times to find if there were any small apartment for rent at a reasonable price or was any close to either her or Rarity's work. And in fact, she did find one. And she told this to Rarity and even showed it. And in fact, it was a reasonable doubt. This was the good price for the rent, and it wasn't that far from either the jobs. We're only maybe 10 minutes for Rarity by a car, and maybe 20 minutes or maybe 25 minutes, depending on traffic, by bus for Trixie. But that didn't even stop them. In fact, when they reached out to the landlord about this idea, and the landlord actually thought, why not? And they actually had enough money to spend the rent, and a few weeks later, they were living together. But there was some parts a part of this idea, maybe perhaps weren't even ready to move in, because it happened that they had small arguments. Because one time they will have a small arguments from time to time though. But one day they had this serious argument. They were actually argued about who put the TV remote. Rarity was going to watch some of her fashion shows on TV, but she couldn't find the remote because Trixie was the last one to watch the TV. But Trixie swears she put on the table, but it wasn't even there. They both looked and looked, tried to find it, but Trixie was accused from hiding the remote so that Rarity would not even to be allowed to see the TV. This argument led to a small fight, to which Trixie just left her home and went to her parents' home. And in fact, Trixie didn't even went back to the apartment for the next week. She stayed at her parents' home for a whole week after that, because she felt maybe it wasn't worth to being go back and be yelled at just because of something. But Rarity actually found the remote just maybe a day after. It was in fact under the couch, but they actually had looked there. But it turned out it was behind some socks that had by mysteriously ended there. But she called the Trixie and apologized for having this unnecessary outburst of anger, accusing her from hiding the remote. And it turned out why this remote was under the tape under the couch. And as was when Trixie was cleaning, she bumped into the table and the remote actually fell on the floor and rolled under the TV under the couch. And that was the reason why they didn't actually find it in the first place, because it was ended up under beneath some socks that was already under the couch. So both actually laughed about this stupid thing that happened afterwards. So they both made a promise never to argue anything like this ever since, because they didn't want to make the relationship to end, because as they had been together for so long, why to have this small argument to lead their relationship to end, which they didn't want to. They loved each other so deeply. But then one small detail actually did happen. As Rarity had her dream to be a fashion designer, at least a famous one, she was in fact approached by Fancy Pants, one of the world's most leading famous fashion designers. He had seen some of Rarity's designs in when he was in town for looking for new talents, and when he saw her shop and seen how really professional her work were, and how her interaction with the customers were, and how much passion she spent in every design, he gave her an offer that she could start working with him and sell her own designs in his company. And she was really amazed, but there was a catch. She had to move across the country. That was the only catch if she had to do that. And he gave her some time to think about for an answer, but he wanted to have an answer at least within the next 2 days. That was as long he was going to stay in Kansas City. So, at after the same evening, when Trixie came home, Rarity was sitting on the couch, but she wasn't even watching some TV. But Trixie at first didn't thought maybe nothing was wrong, but as she said hi to Rarity, she didn't even reply. She wondered if something was wrong, so she went up to her and saw that Rarity was feeling. She was in fact just looking at the TV, and when Trixie pushed a little bit poked on Rarity's shoulder, she immediately saw that it was Trixie, and she asked if something was wrong. Something wasn't even wrong, she said, but then she explained what happened. Wow, she said. But then, when Trixie was told the catch. Oh, um, did he say how long you will stay there? And Writer said no, he didn't mention that. Maybe you can ask him if this is just going to be temporarily or something. And Rarity thought maybe it was best to ask, so she texted Fancy Pants, and he texted her back and said this was going to be for at least a year or 2 years of in employ for assignment at this other side of Castle Country. Rarity was still having 2 days to thinking of an answer. But even if that Rarity herself was willing to was wanted to be a famous designer, and Trixie even convinced her to take the offer. Even if they had been apart for about maybe 1 or 2 years, she will always going over. Trixie said that she would go travel across the country to spend some time with her, even if it's going to for about maybe a weekend. They will make sure this is going to work. So Rarity was still not even convinced if she would even accept the offer, but Rarity was later said by Trixie that at least think about it. You always want to have a famous career as a fashion designer. And now that this opportunity has come into rise to your attention, that you had the opportunity to be a fashion designer, and now you have it. And like you said to me that even if you would have been willing to take the chance, and that I would still be there with you, even if it's a long distance relationship, we will make sure it works. And so it did. So by the next day, Rarity texted Fancy Pants and said that she accepted the offer. And a few days later, she said goodbye to Trixie, and she took a left and went to the other side of the country. But even despite that, they actually remained in touch by either FaceTime or a phone call almost every day, just to make sure there was like some any update what happened. And for next 6 months, Rarity's job as a fashion designer for Fancy Pants was just a great deal. She had an amazing time. She met other famous fashion designers, and she even saw other fashion designer students or some apprentices. She actually had a good time, but she didn't even forget her promise to Trixie. Never forget her. When a whole year had passed, Trixie actually went to fancy to across the country to spend at least a weekend with Rarity. When she arrived, she didn't found Rarity at this place where she's supposed to be living or is staying at. She had turns out it wasn't even home. And turns out she was out with Fancy Pants and his assistant Fiordelise. They were just out for some lunch when Rarity came back to her small apartment. When she saw Trixie standing there, she was happy to see her. They gave each other a big hug and a kiss, and they said, "When did you came here?" And Trixie said, "About an hour, 2 hours ago." She had been waiting outside her apartment for 2 hours, but even that she was going to stay there just for a weekend, she wanted to see her girlfriend for once. And in fact, it was something that they actually wanted to do. But sadly, as the weekend came and it passed, even regardless that Trixie wanted to stay longer, but she couldn't. And Rarity promised they would be seeing each other soon enough again. So as Trixie went off back home to Kansas City, but they still made some time to FaceTime each other, and it worked perfectly. But there were some doubts when Trixie never even get a hold of Rarity for maybe 1 or 2 days. But she knows that being a fashion designer is sometimes getting busy, so she did better put a slide aside. But then, but this repeat maybe twice or maybe 3 times in a week, and she started to wonder if Rarity has started forgetting about her and maybe find someone else to be with. She was actually getting worried that Rarity has fallen in love with someone else. Even when she mentioned this to some of their friends, like Sunset, Trick, and Twilight, they were actually not surprised by this. But they actually did tell Trixie that they were actually talking to Riot themselves for a couple of times in a week, and they were nothing anything like it. So one day, a couple of weeks later, Trixie went to the other side of the country again, but this time she didn't even tell Rarity that she was coming. She wanted as a big surprise. But when she did in fact went to the other town across the country, she was waiting outside her own apartment, but Rarity never came home that day. So Trixie went to her own room then another hotel. But the same day afterwards, she was just walking around the town, just hoping to see Rarity. And in fact, she did. And Rarity wasn't alone. She was with Fancy Pants. But Trixie knew that Fancy Pants were Rarity's new boss. But the only thing is, Rarity wasn't on the street with Fancy Pants. They weren't even at the restaurant. They were in fact in a jewelry store. And they were looking at rings. And when Trixie saw that Rarity was having a ring on his hand and she looked at Fancy Pants with a smile, her heart was crushed. She believed that Rarity was getting engaged with Fancy Pants. So she didn't even notice that. She didn't even notice that Trixie was standing right behind her, behind the other glass of the window. But Trixie slowly stepped away, crying, back to the hotel, packed up bags, and took the other plane back home to Capital City. She didn't even mention this to her friends or family. And each time when Rarity tried to reach out to Trixie on FaceTime, she didn't answer. When Rarity tried to call her, no response. She didn't even. She was like ignoring every single call. She even didn't respond to any text messages. When Rarity didn't got any answer from Trixie, she was very surprised, but most of all, terrified if something had happened. So the only thing she could do, reach out to Sunset, asking her if something had happened to Trixie, if she had been in an accident or something. But Sunset, no, she hasn't. She is pretty much okay. She is normal. She able to work. But when she asked why, and it turns out she had been ignoring Rarity all along. But this was something that Trixie, like something that Sunset and their friends even was aware of. When Sunset actually went to see Trixie the next day, she tried to bring this topic up, but Trixie just didn't want to answer any of those questions. But Sunset then asked, Trixie, is something wrong? You can tell me. At first, Trixie didn't even want to respond to that. But Trixie said, I don't care anymore. What do you mean? You can tell me anything that's happened or bothered you. You can tell me. Trust me. At first, Trixie didn't want to say much. But Trixie then just took a deep breath and said that she saw Rarity with Fancy Pants in a jewelry store, showing that she was having a ring on her hand, and she was smiling towards Fancy Pants. And this was something that Sunset, even herself, was not even aware of what happened. Wait, you actually went there? When? A week ago, she said, to surprise her. When I saw her at this jewelry store, I couldn't even believe it. I believe that she's going to forget me, and now she's dating this Fancy Pants guy. But Rarity Sunset, she was stunned. But Trixie, that's not possible. Oh yeah, because I saw it. No. It's not possible because Fancy Pants is already married. What? Yeah. Did you even know that? No. But who? Fear the least. Like, he's married to his assistant? Yeah, I thought you knew. And then Rarity Trixie realized she was upset make a lot of assumption that Rarity was going to get was engaged with Fancy Pants, but it later turns out that he was already married with Fury Release. So then, what was the deal about the ring? Was it something that he actually was going to give Fury Release? Then Trixie asked, "How long has he been married?" Oh, for about 2 years by this point, I believe. And that actually then rolled out the ring that Fancy Pants has gone to propose to Fury Release. But then the question, I don't wanna. Oh man, I made a terrible mistake. Wait, promise to tell me don't have said anything like this to try to write it all. No, I haven't. Why? And then Trixie said maybe that she believed that Trixie, that at least Rarity, was going to leave her to be betrayed for the Fancy Pants. And Sunset made to realize what Trixie meant. It is best if you call her to tell her what happened. Because she's worried about you that never to even talk to her anymore. She even in fact called me about it a day before and asked if you were in an accident because you never respond to her anymore. And that made Trixie realize by ignoring Rarity's calls, texts, she was getting worried. So she promised to call Rarity the same as soon as possible till she get home. And she did. And in fact, when Rarity answered quickly, she was almost not screaming, but she was having a very much fast talking. She was like, "Are you okay? Where are you? Are you home? Or the hospital? What happened? You don't need to talk to me anymore." But after that, it was silent. Rarity, I had something to tell you. And Trixie explained everything that happened and why she had even answered back to Rarity. Wait, you came here but never told me? And oh, so the ring, was that something for you or for release? She actually didn't answer that. As she only said that was something that she had. It was a gift, but she didn't say to who because she wanted to keep it a secret. But she then imagined she something that she didn't expect to happen. But then, about a week later, when Trixie came home, she found a bag at the door, and she heard a sound from inside the home, and it was Rarity. She was surprised to see that Rarity had come home, but she thought maybe she's home for only about a weekend or something. But it turned out Rarity had told Fancy Pants she is going back home. She she appreciated that she was allowed to stay working with them for about a year, but she preferred to be keeping her own store and her shop back home. And Fancy Pants agreed. He, in fact, didn't mind that. And even though that he's seeing lost of a very promising fashion designer, but he understood. And when Trixie asked how long she's going to stay at home, and Rarity said, forever. That made her happy. But then something else big happened. As they were just looking at each other, Trixie was told by Rarity to close her eyes, and she did. And then Rarity said that she can open her eyes, and what she did, seeing Rarity on her knees, holding this same ring as she was seen at the side of the country when she was went to see Rarity. It turns out the ring that she bought at the store, at this jewelry store, wasn't wasn't for Fancy Pants or anyone else, except it was an engagement ring for Trixie. It turns out that Rarity had plans to propose to Trixie all along. and that she already had made plans to go back home after a year after spent time with had after been working with Fancy Pants. And Trixie though, she was blown away. She said yes immediately, and she was not even expecting this kind of response or even big surprise. Like that Rarity was proposing to her. She was beyond a doubt. She was really beyond our dreams. Her mind was just on a high clouds above herself. She was very shocked, surprised, happy of all the same time. But Rarity, she said, and Trixie said yes, that she wanted to marry her. Because the same day, they even told Rarity's parents and Trixie's parents, and both families were so shocked. But especially Rarity's parents, because they weren't even aware that Rarity had to come home, and now that their daughter was now engaged with Trixie, and that Rarity actually proposed to Trixie the same day as she came home, and when their friends was told, everyone was excited, especially Pinky. Pinky's like, "Oh, I'm gonna throw a big party," and she did. In fact, Pinky threw a party to celebrate their engagement between Rarity and Trixie. And in fact, Trixie was still beyond happy at this in fact had happened. Even if it was only a day after announcement, after that, just even after even despite it had just been a day after that Rarity proposed to Trixie, she was still beyond happy. She couldn't still even believe it. She thought maybe this was still as a dream, and I'm hoping that she wouldn't even wake up from it. But when she realized this wasn't a dream, that it was in fact reality, she was beyond happy. Even though Rarity and Trixie started planning their wedding they planned to have their wedding within the next couple of months. And of course, Trixie had chosen Sunset to be her bridesmaid. And Rarity had asked Fluttershy to be her bridesmaid. And they both accepted their invitation. And given all of this, it was a great deal. Pinky had been asked if she could perform or at least arrange the party after the ceremony, which she did with a great acceptance. So for the next couple of weeks, all the plans for the weekend, the wedding, was getting at full speed. With the decorations, what kind of dress they will be, and what is in the church is going to hold, and where the party is going to be placed, and what type of food is going to have, and how many guests is going to invite, and stuff like that. It's just overwhelming. But for still all this overwhelming news and all these plans for the wedding, Rarity and Trixie didn't even mind at all. Because to them, this was their biggest and happiest time in their lives. And Trixie had even a special invited guest for Rarity. And that was in fact Fancy Pants. Despite that Rarity was no longer working for Fancy Pants, but Trixie perhaps maybe want to invite Fancy Pants and his wife Fiordalise to the wedding as an opportunity to thank Fancy Pants that Rarity had opportunity to work for him to be more accepted as a fashion designer. Even though that Rarity may not be going to be a fashion or famous, but has been given opportunity to fulfill some of her childhood dreams to be a fashion designer. In Fancy Pants, he accepted the invitation, and he was in fact aware about Trixie and Rarity being dating. He was just happy for them. And on the day when the wedding happened, Trixie was waiting at the altar for Rarity, even though when Everyone was well excited about this. Trixie was a bit nervous as she felt like she was going to faint, but she was really happy. Sunset. She, in fact, did promise, or managed to calm Trixie down, telling her things will be fine. Don't have to freak out, not to be worried. Things will going just as they planned to. And then the music started, and Rarity was walking in by her dad by her side, and Trixie, it felt like an eternity, but it felt like a dream that came true. When Rarity was standing by her side, as Trixie was looking at Rarity, then she realized something that she hadn't even thought about in a long time. Seeing Rarity in the same dress, she came to realize, and then she remembered the exact same dress that Rarity was wearing in her dream. The very first dream she had when Rarity appeared in. This was somehow the same scene she had seen in her dream had in fact happened in reality. And it was in fact meant they were supposed to be with each other. And that made her really too excited. After the ceremony was over, everyone witnessed this party that Pinkie Pie had arranged with some help of their friends. And there they all had such great time with the dance, the food, the music, and especially when Sweetie Belle performed at the wedding, at the ceremony, and after party by singing for Rarity and Trixie. Trixie was really happy that now she no longer to be just engaged. Now she was married with the one she loved the most of all in the whole wide world. And for Rarity, she couldn't have wished for anyone better than with Trixie. And even afterwards at the party, when they all having their food, when Trixie was having a small speech, she said, "This is the most happiest day I had in my life. Even more happier than the time when me and my wife Rarity were start dating. Despite the things despite the things I went through in the past, two breakups and the car accident, I cannot have been happier to be with the one I love the most. In even for perspective that Rarity could have lost me after the accident. I don't know how her. I cannot. I cannot even imagine it would be like if I was not there for her. But having her here now, as my wife, is the best thing that has ever happened to me. And for that, I'm grateful to have her in my life, by my side, forever." And that made Rarity smile and cry a little bit, and said that, and she said thanks for it. And then Trixie looked out at some of their friends and family, and especially both of us could have been more happier and feeling grateful to have all of you, all the support, everything that has gone happen in our life for the past few years. For that, both of us are very grateful. Thank you. Everyone was actually very happy and supported their relationship, even before even got engaged and before they got married. But now they were married. Even after all of this, Rarity and Trixie, they didn't even regret a bit this decision. They were clearly meant to be with each other. Even after this party was over, they was later told by Rarity's parents and Trixie's parents had arranged their honeymoon to Paris for a whole week, the city of light and love. They actually were not even expecting this gift, but they thanked their family and friends and went on their honeymoon. And when they arrived in Paris, they didn't even regret to be there. Even they were there for a whole week, but it felt like an eternity that they were at this amazing city. In fact, they went to several stores during their time there, like shopping for fashion stores, and like but they had a great time in Paris. When they came home, though, they still lived in the small apartment, but they managed to have another surprise because Fancy Pants had a second gift, had his own gift for the couple. He actually had bought a small house just in town for Rarity and Trixie, and in fact, they both accepted it as much. And it happened that Trixie, that Rarity, sometimes talked to Fancy Pants and even worked with him for a couple of times, even made some her opinions about some new designs that he was going to sell. And he actually approved that. Rarity decided to even to keep her job in the store, in the town, and in fact, she even sells some of her own designs still. And Rarity Trixie though, she decided to keep working at the small store, the small shop in that mall that she'd worked at before all this. Even if they work at small places, they didn't mind that. But at this point, Trixie had her own driving license and her own car. So they didn't have to be dependent on to being picked up or taken to the one point or another. So, but then, after they had been married for just about 3 years, Trixie and Rarity had been talking about starting a family. So they actually went to this local orphanage, this adoption agency in town. They actually was managed to adopt two daughters. One was about 10, and another was just about 5. But just 2 years later, they wanted to adopt another family, some other child. And in fact, they adopted a boy this time. Trixie and Rude and Rarity was really happy to have their own family and be married. Like 2 daughters and a son. Even despite this could have been a very hectic life for them, like chaotic, but they didn't mind that as much at all. And in fact, this was something that both of them actually had been looking forward to their entire life. Rarity was happy that she still now has her own store, her own shop, but even to have Trixie in her life. Trixie herself, though, she could have been happier to have someone like Rarity in her life, sharing so much passion, so much common interest. Despite what had happened for in their past in the past few years, when Trixie was in the hospital after a car accident, Trixie actually believed she were never going to see Rarity again. And Rarity, when she heard about this accident, she first believed this was going to be the last time she ever is going to see Trixie alive. She could not have even imagined how her life would be if it wasn't that Trixie wasn't there anymore. Rarity, though, she was really happy that Trixie did pull through. And now that we are married and having 3 kids together, she was really happy to share her life with the one that she loved the most of all in this whole wide world. And in fact, it does happen that Rarity goes back to cross the country to work with Fancy Pants for a couple of times, just as some kind of consult. like a assistant. And that didn't bind to Trixie though, because now she knows that Rarity is very, very happy that to be with the one she loved the most of all. And they were actually very happy though, not only because to have each other, but to have a family of their own. As they were growing older, seeing that their children growing older, and eventually one day they also got married, they have their own families one day. And especially Trixie and Rarity was happy to be married, or at least be with the one the most of all in their lives. Regardless of what Trixie had gone through in her past. First her breakup with Sandalwood, and the second with Norman, and now in the third half incident when she was in a car accident. Trixie was fully devastated, surprised that it even happened, and even for Rarity, she never believed that she was going to see Trixie ever again. But both of them was actually very happy that she managed to pull through and survived all of this. But Trixie, she could have been happier to be with the one that she loved most of all in the entire world. Rarity, though, in her mind, Trixie is the one that she loved the most of all. She would do anything to keep her happy. Even Trixie would do the very same thing. And in fact, even at the time when after prom, Trixie, she'd said that she would take a bullet to protect Rarity from any cost. And that was made them to realize they were meant to be each other. And for anything that has happened for them in the past, when Trixie was in a car accident, and now this, then end up to being getting married, having a family, and several grandchildren together. This was clearly what they were meant to be. For Trixie, being married with the one that she loved the most of the entire world meant a lot to her and Rarity. Willing to give up her own dreams to be a fashion designer, to stay and be married with someone she loved, is something that she doesn't regret a single day. She was willing to give up her dream to be a fashion designer, or at least a famous fashion designer, that so she could be with the one that she loved the most of all. Everything they had been going through for the past few years, it is showing how much passion, how much love they were meant to be with each other, and that it was true love is. And for that, Rarity and Trixie are happy to be with the one they loved the most. And this is how Trixie, Lulamoon, and Rarity found true love, got a family together. The end.